Audio Jungle.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me here. Let me first apologize for being a victim of the British educational system and not being able to speak another foreign language. But hey. Okay, so yeah, my name is Adam. I am one of the co-founders of the Bristol Cable Media Cooperative, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about our journey, the theoretical basis for what we're doing, and some of the practicalities and some of the struggles that we are encountering. Now, Gunther asked me to talk a little bit about how we began. So, we began as essentially three friends, deciding what we were going to do after university. And we wanted to bring together a number of different aspects of areas of interest and items of interest that we wanted to pursue. These included skill building, research, community organizing, exploring and testing new business models, and doing something that was accessible within the wider community. So the first thing we came up with was a bakery cooperative. However, we quickly realized that given the long night shifts and the awkward, unsociable working hours, plus the fact that we also quickly realized that the most interesting thing about bread and baking was how it all happened and the context in which it happened overall. So we decided to set up a media cooperative, which we thought very nicely fitted all of the different aspects of what we were doing. And we began in this very, very humble way, and it's for you to judge how far we've come since then, as a piece of A4 paper, as many good ideas do. And we applied for some funding from the UK Federation of Cooperatives. We were awarded a small amount of money, £1,500. And then we proceeded to raise £3,300 through a process of outreach within the community of Bristol. Now, that included going with our little crappy piece of paper and saying to everybody from people in the third sector, business, social enterprises, activists, otherwise people, and saying, we're interested in setting up some sort of alternative model and, alternative model for local journalism in the city. What do you think? And the response, thankfully, was overwhelmingly positive. But off the back of that, we decided that the best way forward was to embark on essentially the second stage of a wider community engagement initiative. And so we launched a program of free 12 workshops across the city of Bristol. Sorry, where's the mouse? Across the city of Bristol. And with that, over 300 people attended. And these are workshops in everything from the basic theoretical premise of public interest journalism, practical skills, film screenings, and so on. And with that, was where we formed the first team of the Bristol Cable. So what is the Bristol Cable trying to do? Our mission statement is as follows. The Bristol Cable is redefining local journalism through challenging multimedia, community action, and cooperative ownership. Online, in print, and on the street. And I'm going to explain what that is. But first of all, why? As you know, and I think I understood that was highlighted in the video earlier, media, particularly local media, is in crisis. And this is increasingly being recognized by politicians, campaigners, journalists, and others, particularly those journalists who are now out of a job. In the UK, there's been a net loss of 198 publications, local publications, since 2005, and the remaining players have suffered a ridiculously prescient downturn in the quality and viability of their journalism and the viability of their business model. Partially because people are no longer paying for journalism, and therefore advertising is becoming increasingly difficult to sell. The other aspect is the corporate structures of journalism, with 80% of media owned by 5 conglomerates. More and more, journalism is seen less as a public interest asset and more as a financial investment vehicle. So how are we trying to solve this problem? The first thing that I'm going to summarize, and I'll go into further detail, is the three-pillar approach to stakeholder media that we have adopted. One, cooperative ownership. Free, at the point of access, public interest journalism, education, and events. And with those 1, 2, and 3, we hope that this is the business model that supports our values. Whereas in conventional media, often the business model undermines those values, we hope that it will actually complement and be an integral part of it. And you can see I've got in there a brackets, hopefully, because it is still yet to be seen. So what is a cooperative, very quickly? One thing that we are absolutely adamant about is being a cooperative is maintaining genuine democratic involvement, but also ensuring that we have a dynamic and efficient organization. So, excuse the low-tech graphic here, but this is essentially how we imagine theoretically, and although we have some work to do, mostly in practice, the way in which our democratic organization runs. At the widest possible point of principles and priorities, we engage our members, and as it filters down the funnel, we have the team, which is currently 10 people, working some full-time, some part-time, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that, who decide the strategy of how to implement the priorities and the principles that have been outlined for us and mandated by us, to us by our membership. And then, as it filters down again, there's the executive agency and authority to an individual to execute the will of the cooperative. So what does this look like in practice? It means that key issues of principle, ethics, and priorities are decided by our members, who at the moment number 1,800 and growing. Examples of this are, and we have many, are certain things which have ethical and political implications, but also very practical applications. So, for example, earlier this year, we had an interesting conversation about whether or not the cable should apply for a Google grant. You may know that Google is trying to push back against its poor reputation for undermining the news media industry, and so they're making a lot of grants to publications, particularly publications doing innovative work. We had a very interesting conversation. As you can see, the members eventually decided, on balance, that we should. Another example was the campaigning aspect of journalism. Does campaigning sort of blur into political activism, and is that a problem for journalism? As you can see, the votes were pretty split. So the second point, why a cooperative? A key aspect of a cooperative that we think is crucial is the accountability and trust issue. In the UK, journalists are trusted less than bankers. I mean, that is a striking statistic. Okay, we all know that polls can be misleading, but this is a relatively respected poll that happens, I think, every year of the UK public in terms of what professions do they trust. So they're down there with politicians, estate agents, and bankers. So accountability, this is absolutely crucial. Not only is this a social importance, but it's actually crucial for the business model as well. Transparency. Regular engagement. So as you can see here in this photo, we have monthly meetings where members can hear from journalists to get the inside story on investigations that we've done, come to explore key ethical or practical questions. And ultimately, all this revolves around us making the pitch to our members that you buy in, you become a shareholder of our organization, one share, one vote, and that means that we cannot sell out, both literally and metaphorically. And that is the basis of what we're trying to do, is to pioneer a model that is majoritarily funded by its stakeholders and by its shareholders on a democratic basis. Next pillar, free access to public interest journalism. So we publish online on our website on multiple times a week. And we also publish a magazine quarterly of 30,000 copies that are distributed for free across the city. You can grab a copy of that outside on the desk later on. So just quickly a note on print. A lot of the discourse is that print is dead, print is dying. We've actually found it incredibly essential to reaching out to diverse communities, for people to initially raise awareness of what we're doing. And also there is a certain value that people associate to having a material product, and it also suits particularly the journalism that we're trying to do, which is magazine journalism in particular. And that's local magazine journalism, rather than news as such. And the basics of our our journalistic approach is to be local, to find the hook, to find the relevance to local people, to make it appropriate and pertinent to people and their families and their conversations and their living rooms and their workplaces, but also make sure that we're connecting it to the wider issues. So here is just a collection of stories that I've selected for this, and they all relate very directly to local issues, but all have a much more wider significance on a national or even international level. So for example, an investigation that we did showed that the Chinese government was behind the latest zero affordable housing development in the city. An investigation that went national, which was the fact that the trickle down of sophisticated surveillance technology from the secret services to local police, offshore tax havenry, private investigators willing to spy on trade union activists and other political activists, and then more localized stories such as serious wage exploitation in a prominent local business. And we also have a variety of features in reporting, and that includes history. So for example, history, foreign languages of community languages in our city, tapping into current and contemporary issues. So for example, the Grenfell fire, which I'm sure you might have heard about, the fire and the devastating fire in the tower block. And also solutions-based journalism. So a place to shoot up that story there is about exploring the idea of safe and secure places for drug addicts to use drugs, basically. And also different voices. So the Arabic one there is of a Sudanese journalist who was exiled from Sudan. That was both in Arabic and English. And then also individuals who have had lived experience of different struggles or different issues. And we also place quite a big focus and emphasis on the visuals and the design aspect of what we're doing. So we have illustrations, we're using data and mapping and other infographics design. So we've got the cooperative element, we've got the journalistic element. And part of that journalistic element is that we want to involve people within the community as much as possible. But we also want to have high levels of journalism, high quality standards. So that led us to introduce a variety of individual workshops and a whole program of workshops in the fundamentals of public interest journalism. One example of that is the Bristol Cable Media Lab. You can find out more on our website, was where we organized 10 sessions of investigative journalism and journalism techniques, from investigating companies, the Freedom of Information Act, interviewing, other video and other skills. And we were able to rope in a lot of really prominent and interesting journalists to help us to do that. And that series of workshops was freely made available to a cohort of 15 people who proceeded through that program over 5 months and are now contributing back to the Cable. Other things that we do is host election debates, film screenings, and so on, often in collaboration with other community organizations. So the 3 pillars then: cooperative media, cooperatively owned, public interest media, education and events. But why? The main reason why is that we have to find a way that we can get people to pay for journalism. And that is like the basics of a lot of the struggles that journalists and publications are facing at the moment. So we have to build our community. But it's not just about the financial aspect. When we build communities, we get tip-offs, we get expert advice, we get the sort of multiplier effect of trust and so on. And we also turn our 1,800 members at the moment into community organizers for the Bristol Cable. And that's something that we're experimenting with at the moment, with something that is lent from political campaigns, particularly progressive political campaigns, where we create leaders within our membership to host semi-autonomous, independent events, whether that's distributing the print magazine or hosting small meetups to discuss particular issues, and so on. And so that comes to the 1, 2, 3 again, a business model that supports our values. So where are we now? How much is that business model materializing, and how much is it working? This is our membership at the moment. So you can see relatively steady growth, 1,800 members, contributing an average of £2.50 a month. So reasonable amount of members, not that much money at the moment. So other financing. We have advertising, which is governed by an ethical advertising charter, which is another example of the involvement of members in determining who and how we will accept advertising in line with our values and what's acceptable and what's not. And that covers all of our printing costs at the moment. And then we have grant funding. We've been incredibly lucky and fortunate to be recipients of some money from an American philanthropic foundation, both for core costs, and we've applied for smaller project-specific costs. So, for example, ongoing journalistic campaign into police surveillance, and one to run our education program again. And this is just a little side note, but I'm sure many of you know that there's not that at the moment in particular, there's not that many things that we'd like to take from America and learn from what's going on in America. But the non-profit journalism sector is actually quite healthy there. I mean, it's mainly funded by philanthropy, but it's very much a booming sector, and it's really kicking off there. And so we were very lucky to get that sort of funding from an American philanthropic organization. If you'd like to see in more detail about our accounts and our financial breakdowns and so on, you can do so on our website. Excuse me. So, what's next? We have to see, in the Bristol Cable, rapid membership growth. We need to be looking at doubling our members within the next year or so if we want to make this a viable and financially viable, sustainable operation. And part of that is improving our digital offering, both journalism and engagement. So the journalism is doing more multimedia, more data stuff, more interactives, using the technologies that are very much out there and available for journalists to use at the moment. And also the engagement aspect, which is essentially finding ways to take the offline engagement, which we have quite secure at the moment with monthly and annual meetings, and transform that into a digital arrangement where we have people voting, discussing, prioritizing, organizing meetups, and basically reducing all of the barriers possible, reducing as many barriers as possible for people to engage with not only what we're doing as an organization, but with one another. And that comes back to the community building aspect of what we're doing. The other thing is considering replication. The ultimate aim of the Cable, as the only organization in the UK that's doing this at the moment, is to find and test and prove a model that can be replicated with its own local flavors and interpretations in other cities and towns across the UK. And that's something that we're exploring right now. And we've had a lot of interest from places all over the UK and abroad. And then also seizing the moment, unbeknown to us at the time, and it's evidenced here today, is that local journalism, and in particular, and journalism in general, is being recognized as an absolutely crucial sort of like forefront in journalism at the moment. And more you're seeing people getting on board with these ideas. And so we're very closely working with organizations like the Global Investigative Journalism Network, the Center for Investigative Journalism, the Bureau Local, which is a brand new project funded by Google, by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in the UK, to network and link up to do data-driven stories in the UK, the European Investigative Journalism Center, and more. And what all of that is speaking to, and what we're trying to do, is to seize the crucial moment, both for journalism and the public as a whole. Because in many respects, same challenges for journalism are the same challenges for the wider social issues that we're facing. We're facing extreme challenges of our models, of getting to grips with actually the crisis that is facing local journalism, and a lot of sort of like public engagement as a whole, diversifying the voices, the ideas, the people, and so on. And it's with that that the Bristol Cable is trying to tackle, and I'm very happy to see a room full of people here trying to do the same. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to take questions, of course.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you so far. It was very interesting. Yeah, gibt's Fragen? Are there questions? Feel free to ask them in English or German, auf Englisch oder auf Deutsch. Gerne Fragen.
Did you ever get sued by? Hi. Did you ever get sued by a local company? Because I think if you like announce or show that some companies work together with the Chinese, and you maybe make them doing less money, that they might try to fight against you.
So we haven't actually been sued. We've been threatened a number of times. We've had letters, we've had, angry emails like this. We've never actually been sued, which is great, obviously, because in the UK in particular, I'm not sure what the situation is here, but the UK libel laws and media laws are very, very claimant weighted. They're weighted towards the individual against the publication, which in many respects is good and valid, because it means that an individual can take the Daily Mail to court, and it can take the Sun to court, and all of these trashy newspapers who are constantly defaming people. But it also means that you can get drawn into court very quickly and have a very costly legal battle, and even if you win, it would, for something like the Bristol Cable, it would totally ruin us. So we have had some threats, but we're confident that we can stack up the facts and that our allegations are legitimate, and we've been very fortunate to have the help and advice of people who have expertise in media law. Yeah.
Thanks. More questions? I have to go here to see it. And maybe you don't have to, but maybe the others can introduce themselves so that we all know a little more about each other.
Can you tell us more about your education program, the Media Lab program? Was it the plan to reach young professional journalists, or was it a program for citizens to get more citizen journalism in Bristol?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially the answer is a mix. One of the things that we tried to do with the application, with the sort of promotion and application process, was to try to get a group that was weighted. So we would have some people with experience, some people older, some people with no experience, from diverse communities in the city, and so that we could find a way, not that it wasn't just individuals moving, one by one through the program, but we're working together collaboratively. And so it's something that we definitely need to improve on for the next year coming. But some of those people are now working a lot with the cable, although they never really had done journalism before. Somebody has actually come to work for I forgot the name of it now. I think it might be the German state broadcaster for the English language section of that. And yeah, a few other people who have some experience and are involved a little bit, and some are involved a lot, and yeah. But really, what we were trying to do with that there is one of the problems with the collapse of local media is very difficult for people to get entry-level jobs in journalism, particularly on a local level. And so that was something that we're trying to do, is to get people to sort of very basic, your first sort of experience in journalism. This is where you can get on the ladder. And then, we're then offering sort of advanced skills and training and mentoring for people who we see have the talent and motivation to carry on.
Hello, my name is Marius Meyer. I'm a freelance TV journalist. And I have two questions. I would like to know how many people do work for you paid, how big is your team, and do you report only about the city of Bristol or also its surrounding?
Yeah. So the first question is, we have 10 people who are like on the team, but that's equivalent to 5 full-time people. So about 5 people are doing part-time, and there's a number of those that are in the editorial team, other people who are managing and developing the membership aspect, people who are doing the sort of like the finance and administration element, and then people who are doing the project development and sort of like business strategy stuff. And then we have a range of people who contribute on a one-off or on a regular basis, journalism. The second question is mainly about the city, obviously with the caveat that we're trying to link international and national issues to the city. And now, because of some changes to the local government structure in our area, we'll be covering much more of the region of the southwest as well. But for example, look out on the Bristol Cable website and probably in the national media on the 9th of October, there's going to be quite a big story, which is based on a data set that we acquired from the Home Office, which is the Home Department for the UK, that covers 11 cities, including Bristol. And that project is in collaboration with the Bureau of Investigative Journalism's Bureau Local project. And that's basically about local stories that have national significance.
My name is Petra Kohn from Top Talente. I just wonder, do you also work together with journalistic education center, so that young people can have an internship with you, so that they could come and have this would be one question. And the other one, I did not really get, how do you work with Google together? What's the share of Google in it? Did you say that? Or did I didn't really understand. Yeah.
No, that's okay. No, just quickly on the Google aspect, so Google have initiated a program of grants, of funding for news projects. And we asked our membership whether or not we should apply for that funding, because obviously the Google issue is quite a problematic and ethical question in many respects. In the eventuality, the members decided that we could apply for it, but then that was just a mandate to give the team the authority to. But then the team decided, for various reasons, that in this round we wouldn't, and maybe we won't ever. So there's no involvement of Google at the moment. On the question of education, we're increasingly having. It's taken a while, particularly because sometimes universities move quite slowly. But we're having a developing relationship with the local university for journalism students to do work with us. When either like during their program of study or afterwards. And we also offer like week-long or 2-week-long work experience for students in high school.
Hello, my name is Georg Watzlawick. I'm running a local digital newspaper at the town of Bergisch Gladbach. I'm wondered about the term cooperative. What do you understand under cooperative? Is it not more a membership program, or do the people invest in your cooperative?
Well, it's a membership program in the sense that it's a cooperative in the sense that every member is a shareholder. So each member holds one share in the organization. But it's not an investment as yet, because we're not turning enough profit for them to have a dividend.
But he is investing and he gets a share because he is a member.
Yeah.
Paying monthly.
Yeah, and that entitles, basically the reason why it makes it a membership rather than a subscription is that they become entitled to have certain rights and benefits in the organization. So they can stand for election as a director, they can elect directors, they can participate in the democratic decision-making aspects of it.
By British law, is it a cooperative? In Germany,
yeah.
A cooperative would be an association or something like that.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, it is, yeah. Because, the baseline level of being a cooperative in British law is that it's one member, one vote, and that directors are elected. And everything else that we do is just an addition that we have the freedom to do or not under law. Yeah.
Questions?
Hello, my name is Teresa Konrad. If I understood correctly, a significant part of your funding comes from a philanthropic organization from the US.
Yeah.
So my question is, for how long have you secured that funding? So for how long can you count on that funding? And how much time is seeking funding from philanthropic donors? How much time is it absorbing your energy and time?
Yeah, 3 years as of this year. And our pitch to them was that by 3 years, we'll be majoritarily self-financed. And that, I think, is something that we've discovered is quite interesting to a lot of funders. They don't increasingly are looking for organizations that aren't just a black hole of money, but are at least turning over some sort of revenue independently. On the second question, how much time does it take? Well, in many respects, it doesn't take that much time. And the reason is because that in the sort of philanthropic sector in the UK, we don't actually qualify for a lot of the funding, because all of that funding is set up for charities. And we're not a charity. We wouldn't qualify to be a charity. We didn't want to be a charity for various reasons, including political restrictions on being a charity, which were introduced by the Thatcher government on campaigning or, particular issues. And that means that we're kind of in a bit of a gray zone for finding funding. So one thing that we've got funding for from the UK funder is the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is a really big foundation, and they set up a specifically different corporate entity, as in not a charity, in order to fund projects that would otherwise fall out of the scope of charitable funding. And that in particular was a journalistic campaign for transparency and surveillance on a piece of police technology called IMSI catchers. And I know in Germany, for example, just as a side note, the police have to report to Parliament every time that an IMSI catcher is used, which is basically an indiscriminate collection of cell phone data, both metadata and the contents of text messages and phones and so on. In the UK, there's absolutely no regulation or oversight at all on this issue. So that's something that we're campaigning on, but that campaign would fall outside of charitable funding. So the short answer is not that much time, because there's not that much available.
More questions? Yeah. Not. Is there one? No? Okay.
Okay, then I'm Benjamin from the yet to be founded Spruce magazine. And how did you find the companies to apply for funding? So how did you connect with them?
Yeah. So we've only had one significant relationship with a funder that is beyond a couple of thousand for a sort of restricted projects. And that was actually through a brilliant organization called the Center for Investigative Journalism, which is a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to improve the skills and development of investigative journalism, mainly in the UK, but also internationally. And we were invited to deliver a workshop or a lecture there, and we were introduced to the president of the philanthropic foundation that funds them, which is the same American foundation. All the rest have been quite small projects, and that's just there's various resources or people who talk in the kind of sector who are talking about these things or meeting at events like this. Yeah.
Questions? Oh yeah.
Hey, my name is Eva and I'm working for Ort NRW. I'm curious about, did you ever have this whole cooperative thing? Did you ever have the problem that you couldn't decide as fast as you wanted to because you had to ask all the members? Did you ever have a problem with that, or is it working really fine? Because I'm wondering if it slows you down a little bit in some ways.
Yes, it does. It does definitely slow it down a little bit, and there's several examples of that. Like, for example, we wanted to, so the magazine is 36 pages, and we initially decided that we would only have 5 pages of advertising. But we wanted to increase the page count in the magazine, but also increase the number of adverts to 8 pages. And that is the decision that needs to be made by the cooperative. And that means, you've got to create the whole proposal and make sure everybody's engaged and some sort of like social media and promotional strategy to make it genuine and so on. Whereas otherwise it's just 5 or 6 people make the decision and go. The trade-off is, the other aspects, that you are trying to build up, and can be slow and it can be, a little bit frustrating, but I guess the sort of the bet that we're making is that the trade-off is worth it in terms of getting the buy-in, both, sort of emotively and financially and, personally from individuals within the community.
More questions? No. So thank you very much